This is a Fox News Alert. I'm Doug McKelway in for Brett Baier. We are learning more tonight about what Hillary Clinton said and did not say in her FBI interview during the investigation of her email scandal. It was an investigation that ended with a recommendation of no charges, only an admonition from the FBI director about extreme carelessness. Tonight, a look at how that conclusion was reached. Here is Chief Intelligence Correspondent Catherine Herridge.
The 11-page FBI summary of Hillary Clinton's July 2nd interview shows the former Secretary of State could not remember key details about her emails more than 24 times. Clinton told FBI agents she could not recall when she got a security clearance. Clinton could not recall any briefing or training on classified information. And Clinton could not recall specialized training for managing the U.S. government's most closely held secrets, known as special access programs. Critics aren't buying it.
It isn't plausible. Not someone with her background, experience, training. She's an attorney, 25 years in government, and suddenly she has selective amnesia. It's not plausible. It's not believable.
The same week Clinton became Secretary of State, she signed 2 non-disclosure agreements where she said she knew the rules and that violating these agreements could result in criminal charges.
If this information gets released, it allows our adversaries to start connecting the dots.
Clinton told the FBI that she could not recall the details surrounding the 2009 setup of the ClintonEmail.com domain. She told agents the personal email account was a matter of convenience. FBI agents do not appear to press Clinton on the issue, further reinforcing Republican criticism of the FBI director's investigation.
Remember, James Comey said she was not indicted because he didn't have sufficient evidence on the issue of intent. She said she did it for convenience, but I didn't see the follow-up questions in the interview I read.
Clinton was asked about this 2011 cable, first reported by Fox News, that advised against personal email use for State Department employees. She said she could not recall the specific cable. The heavily redacted FBI summary also shows Clinton was questioned about the 22 top-secret emails, too damaging to release for national security reasons, which include the drone campaign, as well as human spying for CIA programs.
Leaking information about programs, sources, and methods, especially the names of assets, gets people killed.
A separate document providing a case timeline shows 13 of Clinton's mobile devices are unaccounted for. Without a forensic examination, the FBI could not determine if any were hacked. This afternoon, the Clinton campaign released a statement that reads in part, while her use of a single email account was clearly a mistake and she has taken responsibility for it, these materials make clear why the Justice Department believed there was no basis to move forward with this case. And Trump also responded saying, I was absolutely shocked to see that her answers to the FBI stood in direct contradiction to what she told the American people. After reading these documents, I really don't understand how she was able to get away from prosecution. The Trump campaign also said the secret email server was essentially an end run around government transparency laws.
Clinton said way back when at that press conference at the United Nations that she had 2 mobile devices. We now know, as you just reported, that she had 13. What became of those 13 devices?
Well, one of the striking revelations in these documents is that at one point an aide to Bill Clinton physically took a hammer to smash Clinton's BlackBerries when she was done with them. And we don't know what happened to the 13, so there's no forensic review to determine one way or the other whether it was hacked. And the other revelation is that just 3 weeks after the New York Times first reported that there was this secret email setup, one of the IT management companies had an oh crap moment. This is like in the FBI documents, and they did this mass deletion. Yes, I am. They did a mass deletion of these records. And the other thing I would say is, unfortunately, the FBI agents in this particular case really appear to be acting like stenographers, not aggressive investigators.
Catherine, thank you.
You're welcome.
Now, original Fox News reporting on the crisis in military aviation. We have alarming news about how many Navy jets can fly and how many cannot. Plus, we have new details about a story we broke, the dire condition of the Marine Corps Air Fleet. Pentagon producer Lucas Tomlinson has a Fox News exclusive.
36-year-old Marine Major Sterling Norton was killed when his F-18 crashed just 6 weeks ago. His was one of 3 F-18 fighter jets from the same squadron that have crashed since October, killing in all 2 Marine pilots. Sterling's commanding officer called him one of his best. Major Norton's mother told Fox News, quote, I want to wait for the investigation report. However, these jets are too old and should not be flown anymore. The head of Marine Corps Aviation seems to share her concern.
I worry about my young aviators that aren't getting the number of hours they need to. And so it's the mishap that looms in our bow that we don't see coming just now. Will they have the experience to keep that bad thing from happening?
A Fox News investigation reveals that overall, the entire U.S. military saw a 48% increase in non-combat aviation crashes between 2014 and 2015 compared to 2 years prior. With 9 more crashes already this year, 4 were Navy jets. The admiral in charge of naval aviation denies there's a link between the crashes and the age and readiness of his branch's planes.
I wouldn't characterize it as a crisis. I get a question a lot, do you tie it to readiness or a lack of proficiency and currency? And in the review of those mishaps, I can't make that connection.
But according to the Navy's own data, only 21% of early model Navy F-18 Hornets can fly, and only 50% of its newer Super Hornets can, due to shortages in critical spare parts and maintenance. And congressional leaders are taking notice of the increase in crashes.
They're going up partly because they're not getting the training they should get. They're going up because maintenance is harder and harder to accomplish. They're going up because the airplanes are getting older and older.
Other branches are under the same pressure as the Navy. Only 2 of the Marines' 12 F-18 Hornet squadrons meet their flying hours.
I'll tell you that in order to get to 75% mission capable, I do know about another 366 airplanes in the Marine Corps.
Right now, of the Marines' 273 F-18s, only 91 can fly. Hits to the military's readiness keep coming. Since 2009, the defense budget has been cut by more than $100 billion, while the high tempo of combat operations hasn't slowed.
When the president sends more people to Afghanistan, more people to Iraq, he doesn't ask for more money. The costs just come out of the training, the maintenance, and the readiness of our force. So the problem is getting worse.
The Pentagon disagrees. In a statement to Fox News, quote, "We have looked at our data and have not observed an overall trend in the increase of mishaps due to reduced training hours. Any increases we have observed are too small and over too short a duration to categorize." F-18s were designed for 6,000 flight hours, but they've now been extended to 8,000, awaiting the new Joint Strike Fighter. The head of Marine Corps Aviation tells Fox News he'd love to buy new jets faster if he could, but the money isn't there. Doug?
Our Pentagon producer, Lucas Tomlinson. Thank you, Lucas. Tropical storm Hermine is soaking much of the American southeast tonight, raining on Labor Day weekend plans and turning the lights out for thousands of people. Tropical storm watches and warnings have been issued up and down the East Coast as far north as Connecticut. Hermine made landfall early this morning in Florida as a Category 1 hurricane. 1 person has been killed thus far. There have been major flooding and property damage as well. We have Fox team coverage tonight. Meteorologist Rick Reichmuth in the Fox Weather Center. He tells us where the storm is headed. Reporter Caroline Shively in Kill Devil Hills, North Carolina, where they are preparing for the worst. But we begin with correspondent Phil Keating tonight in St. Simons Island, Georgia, with a look at the damage already done. Good evening, Phil.
Good evening, Doug. This island sits about 200 miles from where Hurricane Hermine slammed into the Florida Panhandle. Still, residents here say the winds were, quote, insane. Throughout the day as Tropical Storm Hermine marched north through Georgia, her ferocity felt here diminished dramatically. Now Hermine heads towards 23 million Americans this holiday weekend. Across the Florida Panhandle, evidence of Hurricane Hermine's impact litter towns like Cedar Key. Flooded streets, busted doors, and broken windows. One resident taunted the storm, spray painting this boarded up window. "Bring it on, Hermine." And she did.
Oh my God. I can't see.
80-mile-an-hour winds, heavy rains, and 5-foot storm surges along the Gulf Coast.
Well, we usually have sandbags up and everything to make sure we're prepared for it, but, I mean, it came through the walls. I mean, there's no way to prepare for that much storm surge coming in.
Many people wisely evacuated ahead of the storm. One who didn't, a homeless man in Leon County, Florida, died when a large tree crushed his tent. In Tallahassee, hundreds upon hundreds of downed trees blocked roads, broke through roofs, and toppled power lines.
This is what it is. You just listen and watch. If it gets bad, you leave. If you think you can ride it out, ride it out.
Florida Governor Rick Scott said 300,000 people lost power. Many won't have electricity returned for perhaps days.
We will spend the coming days assessing the damage and responding to the needs of our communities and Florida families. But the number one thing is to stay safe.
After downgrading to a tropical storm, Hermine still packs a punch. Rough surf and bands of wind and rain whipping the Georgia coastline on Hermine's march north through the deep south. For millions this holiday weekend, there is no fun in the sun.
About every 45 minutes, transformers were blowing until about 6, 4 in a row. That was it.
Just a lot of wind and 5 to 10 inches of rain, bringing life-threatening flash flooding and tornado possibilities up the East Coast. And tens of thousands of Georgians tonight are also still without electricity thanks to all of those transformers that blew up in Hermine's winds and rain. Doug?
Phil Keating in St. Simon's Island tonight. Thank you, Phil. North Carolina's barrier islands are now bracing for a heavy hit over the weekend. Reporter Caroline Shively is in Kill Devil Hills, North Carolina. Good evening, Caroline.
Hi there, Doug, and we're already feeling the beginning of what Florida got last night and what Georgia and South Carolina have been feeling throughout the day. The rain's coming at us sideways. The winds are picking up, but the biggest change I've seen since this morning are those waves. Check out the whitecaps. The waves are getting bigger, meaner, and uglier by the hour. We're expecting a storm surge between 1 and 3 feet before this thing hits us sometime tomorrow morning. You add that with the rain totals, which have gone up over these last few hours. We're expecting 5 to 8 inches of rain. We could get up to 12 inches, and that's a problem. Think of the vulnerability of these islands here. It's this pencil-thin stretch of sand. We have the Atlantic at our back. We have the Sound at our front, a very low-lying area which could be overwhelmed. The winds as well are what we are really worrying about. We could get between 45 mile per hour, 50 mile per hour winds with gusts of even higher than that. So plenty of folks out here taking pictures, walking around, enjoying the surf now, but things should get uglier overnight. Doug, back to you.
Caroline Shively on the Outer Banks of North Carolina. Thank you. Well, let's find out what Hermine will be doing this weekend. Meteorologist Rick Reichmuth at the Fox Weather Center in New York. Good evening, Rick.
Hi, Doug. Yeah, Caroline is right. It is going to be much worse across the Outer Banks overnight tonight. Center of the storm right here across parts of South Carolina, where we've seen over 10 inches of rain. Some spots cause a lot of flooding, and tornado concerns will continue to be the case throughout the evening as the storm continues to rotate on shore. When that happens, that rotation from the storm causes additional rotation, and we start to see a little bit of tornado activity with the friction of the land. This will continue to pull off towards the northeast as it does. Heaviest of the rain is going to be across North Carolina throughout the overnight and into the start of the day tomorrow. Some spots there, likely 8 to 12 inches of rain, and that is going to be causing the continued threat for flash flooding. Where you see that red, we have flash flooding going on as we speak. All right, here's the track of the storm. By tomorrow afternoon, it is off the shore of the Outer Banks there. Then it settles in across parts of the Delmarva Peninsula, just to the eastern areas of New Jersey, and it settles in here for a while. Some indications we will likely see the strengthening back to hurricane strength winds right here off the shore of Jersey, likely not making a landfall, but bringing a lot of water in. Because of that, we have tropical storm warnings in effect all the way through the Jersey coastline, tropical storm watches for New York City, Long Island, coastal areas of Connecticut. We're going to see a lot of water being pulled in here. This is wave heights. Take a look at what happens here. This yellow here, Sunday evening, we're going to be watching waves potentially 25 to 30 feet high coming in across the Jersey shore there. Keep in mind, we had all the damage from Hurricane Sandy before, and people like to get out this weekend to enjoy the last weekend of summer, Doug. It is not going to happen. Potentially a lot of damage here, and a really serious situation going on for folks along areas of the Mid-Atlantic into the Northeast for this last summer holiday weekend.
All right, Rick, thank you very much. Keep us posted. We will be watching. A major slowdown last month in hiring is calling into question the Federal Reserve's plan to increase interest rates anytime soon. The U.S. economy added just 151,000 jobs last month, and that led to surprisingly positive numbers on Wall Street. The Dow gained 73, the S&P 500 was up 9, NASDAQ finished ahead 23. And for the week, the Dow, the S&P, and NASDAQ were all up about a half a percentage point. And we'll be talking to Trish Reagan a little bit later on about that. Samsung is recalling its new Galaxy Note 7 smartphone because some of its batteries have exploded or caught fire. The phones are being pulled from shelves in the U.S. and in 9 other countries just 2 weeks after the launch time. Samsung says there have been 35 instances of phones catching fire or exploding, but so far, no injuries. The company is not saying whether owners should stop using the phones. Coming up next, Donald Trump targets the minority vote. And now to America's election headquarters and Donald Trump shifting his emphasis from immigration to the economy and racial politics. Chief political correspondent Carl Cameron begins our coverage from New York tonight.
After receiving his second classified national security briefing at FBI headquarters in Manhattan, Donald Trump flew to Philadelphia for a roundtable discussion with African-American community, business, and religious leaders. The latest Fox poll shows Trump with 12% of support among black voters, but other polls have him in the single digits. He also met today with an African-American mother whose 20-year-old daughter was savagely murdered execution style in a Newark schoolyard by a gang of illegal immigrants.
We're the only hope. We're the only ones that know what's going on with illegal immigration. Hillary Clinton has no clue. Not at all. And doesn't care.
Trump's African-American outreach takes him to Detroit tomorrow, where he'll tape an interview with Bishop Wayne T. Jackson for the Impact Network, the nation's only African-American owned and operated Christian TV channel. Bishop Jackson submitted his questions to the campaign in advance, and Trump aides scripted the answers. Trump is also planning to address the congregation at Great Faith Ministries International Church live tomorrow, then visit inner-city neighborhoods with Dr. Ben Carson, who grew up in Detroit. After Trump's trip south of the border and his big immigration speech Wednesday, he told the Wall Street Journal that he toughened up his speech when Mexican President Peña Nieto tweeted that he told the Republicans candidate that his country would not pay for Trump's promised border wall. Trump last night insisted he will get Mexico to pay for a border wall despite the Mexican president's adamant refusal.
He disagrees on who's going to pay for the wall, but that's a negotiation, and I will tell you that the United States will not be paying for the wall. Mexico will be paying for the wall. If I become president, now somebody else becomes president, probably, it will go right down the tubes like it always does with the politicians.
Trump's team this week warned him that his path to victory is shrinking and time's running out for him to get back on a winning track. And the Trump campaign recently complained to the Republican National Committee that it was not opening up enough campaign field offices in the key battleground states. Turns out, the party was waiting for the Trump campaign to sign the leases, and now they're scrambling to play catch up. Doug?
Carl Cameron outside Trump Towers in Manhattan tonight. Thank you, Carl. Americans' election headquarters in depth tonight. Donald Trump in Detroit. It is part of the Republican nominee's outreach to minorities in general and to African Americans in particular. Correspondent Peter Ducey is in Detroit tonight with what residents think about Trump's visit.
For decades, many Detroit residents have voted Democrat by default, but recently this inner-city GOP office has been getting a lot of new visitors.
We've had people coming in looking for Donald Trump signs. We've had people who became, wanted to be volunteers strictly based off Donald Trump.
Michigan never got a visit from Mitt Romney after his 2012 convention, but Trump is about to make his third trip since becoming the nominee, this time to an inner-city Detroit church. And a script of suggested remarks obtained by the New York Times reveals Trump is being urged to say that, quote, coming into a community is meaningless unless we offer an alternative to the horrible progressive agenda that has perpetuated a permanent underclass in America.
He's saying, hey, I may not be the person you thought would be best to represent you, but take a chance on me because what you keep voting for is not doing better for your communities.
But some say they're voting for the Democrat because that's just what they've always done.
I'm a fourth generation Democrat. I don't have anything to lose, but with him, I don't have a lot. I don't feel like I have a lot to gain. And, if it's a 50-50 borderline, I think I'm going to stick with my past history.
You don't think that there's any kind of an appetite to see what else somebody else might be able to do?
No, not right now.
We were raised like that, and our parents were Democrats, and it's just in our blood.
Still, Republicans sense an opportunity.
A lot of people, millennials in particular, don't have the same loyalty to the party as maybe their parents did.
And just because there's deep loyalty to the Democratic Party here doesn't mean there's deep loyalty to the Democratic nominee.
I'm not a Hillary fan or supporter at all, but at least I can say that she has given her supporters something of substance to support. Bernie all the way.
Donald Trump has compared inner city neighborhoods to war zones, and tomorrow he's coming to one where most businesses are boarded up and many lots are overgrown with brush, with a promise that all this will get cleaned up if he gets elected president. Doug?
Peter Ducey in Detroit tonight. Thank you, Peter. We are pleased to tell you tonight that Fox News Sunday anchor Chris Wallace will moderate the final presidential debate of the fall. The Commission on Presidential Debates announced its selections today. NBC's Lester Holt works the first debate, September 26th, from Hofstra University. Elaine Quijano of CBS handles the vice presidential session, October 4th, at Longwood University in Virginia. CNN's Anderson Cooper and Martha Raddatz of ABC will co-host the second presidential debate, a town hall from Washington University in St. Louis. And then Chris Wallace takes the final session, October 19th, from Las Vegas. Well, we told you moments ago about the August jobs numbers, 151,000 jobs created. Unemployment stays at 4.9%. Let's get more on the economy now from Fox Business Network's Trish Reagan. She joins us from New York tonight. Good evening, Trish.
Hi, Doug.
How would you characterize this new jobs report?
Well, on the surface, it looks good, right? When you're talking about 4.9% being the unemployment rate. However, when you peel back the layers here, it's not all that good. In fact, 151,000 jobs being created, while it's something, is not the number of jobs that we need to really start to grow this economy. Right now, we're stuck in that 1% growth range, not a whole lot. And 4.9%, while that seems like it's a low unemployment rate, Doug, you got to look at the labor participation rate. This is the number of people that are getting into the workforce. We saw that in the month of August, more than 576,000 people actually just gave up looking for work altogether, said it's not worth it. And so now the labor force participation rate, the number of people that are actually going to work every day or looking to go to work every day, it is at a level, Doug, that we haven't seen since the 70s, and we've been stuck there now for a while. So overall, look, it's not a good report. The economy is not in a good spot, and we need to start adding real jobs that are paying real wages if we're going to start growing things again.
If they're out there. Trish, this all raises the question, if the job market and the economic outlook are indeed so poor, why do investors keep bidding the market higher?
It's a good question, and I'll tell you why. The Federal Reserve, Janet Yellen and company, they have left rates at record lows for a record amount of time. And so, Doug, investors are saying, well, where can we put our money? How are we going to get some kind of return? I mean, you can't put it in a treasury bond. You can't put it in the local bank and get any kind of return on, say, a CD. So they are pushed into riskier assets. In this case, the stock market. So what's remarkable about all of this, of course, is that, many say we need to do more about income inequality in the United States of America. Well, the Federal Reserve has inadvertently, through the law of unintended consequences, help actually create bigger disparities in wealth by enabling the wealthier to get wealthier and the poor to really continue their struggle.
Trish Reagan from Fox Business Network. Thank you very much, Trish. Good to see you.
You bet, Doug. Good to see you.
President Obama is participating in his final G20 summit over the weekend in China, and it is the American relationship with the world's most populous country that will be the U.S. leader's focus. Correspondent Kevin Cork is traveling with the president and reports tonight from Hangzhou, China.
It was supposed to represent a global gathering of the world's leading economies, a showcase for China's emergence as a world power, even President Obama's valedictory tour of the Asia-Pacific region. But this year's G20 summit in Hangzhou, China, may well most be remembered for what was not on the official agenda at the meetings.
The Chinese have scrubbed the agenda of anything controversial, South China Sea, cyber, North Korea, you name it. So what I think the president is going to do is talk about the issue, but on the sidelines of the event.
But talk has yielded precious little when it comes to China. Despite a UN ruling that its activities were unlawful, the Chinese have continued to expand claims in the disputed South China Sea. What began with the construction of artificial islands in the Spratly Chain has now grown to include the contested Scarborough Shoal.
We will have a candid exchange about areas where we have significant differences, issues like human rights, cyber and maritime issues.
That was the president back in March. and little has changed since. Experts say his tone won't likely change much here at the G20, but they do believe a newly forged relationship between the U.S. and India may give Washington the upper hand long after the president has left office.
The Chinese are apoplectic about this, and this is a real indication that both New Delhi and Washington are going to work very closely on the South China Sea.
We see this trip as really bringing together a number of the president's top priorities really for the last 7.5 years.
Priorities including the ongoing fight against Chinese cyber intrusions. The leaders for both countries agreed to avoid economic cyber espionage in September last year. The president says those crimes not only drive up consumer costs, left unchecked, could place American service personnel at risk. Doug, that's because often economic espionage is really just military espionage by any other name. And let me give you a very quick example of that. Drone technology. Yes, there are commercial and military applications for drones. And let's say a country is stealing proprietary intelligence on commercial drone delivery systems. Certainly that could have a military implication as well. And that's just one quick example. Doug?
Kevin Cork in Hangzhou, China tonight. Thank you, Kevin. Officials in England are joining counterparts in other European countries and taking radical Islamic prisoners out of the ranks of the general prison population in many facilities. It all has to do with radicalization, and it is a problem in this country as well. Correspondent Benjamin Hall explains tonight from London.
Prisons in the UK have been called jihadi training camps, as new government research shows the extent of Islamic radicalization. In terror attack after terror attack across Europe, one thing has been constant. Many of the attackers were radicalized behind bars. They went in as petty criminals. They came out as terrorists. One reformed jihadi explained why prison is such a target for radical Muslims.
What makes a good recruit is someone that is already disenfranchised, someone who is anti-establishment, who holds some kind of resentment.
Easy pickings for radical Muslim preachers like Anjem Choudhury, one of the most notorious hate preachers in Britain, who was recently sentenced to 10 years for supporting ISIS. Now the UK government is introducing new laws which will keep people like Choudhury away from other inmates.
We cannot have a situation where we have extremist prisoners influencing others who are vulnerable to those messages.
The US prison system is also facing this problem, with Muslim groups acting like gangs, recruiting people and protecting their own. According to a former Al-Qaeda recruiter, now working at a think tank at George Washington University.
The individual charismatic preacher that radicalized me while I was incarcerated became like a father.
The recruiter turned scholar says he saw 30 to 40 prisoners radicalized around him in the 3 years he was in US jail, and said that many radical preachers had not been identified by the authorities.
It goes on very frequently in general mainstream or what you call medium or high security prisons as well.
And this point will resonate strongly with those who are against Guantanamo detainees being transferred to US prisons, where they might also be seen as celebrities, able to influence other prisoners. Here in the UK, the government learnt the hard way after numerous terror attacks were carried out by people radicalized in prison. It just remains to be seen if these new measures are enough or too little, too late. Doug?
Benjamin Hall, late in London tonight. Thank you, Benjamin. Cleanliness is definitely not next to godliness tonight in Houston. Authorities say hundreds of criminal cases are in jeopardy after a deputy constable destroyed more than 20,000 pieces of evidence while cleaning a property room. The DA says nearly 150 cases have been dismissed already. More than 1,000 others are being reviewed. The deputy has been fired. Well, we now know what Hillary Clinton said to the FBI during its investigation of her email scandal. We'll talk about it with our panel when we come back.
Nothing was marked classified at the time I sent or received it.
Our investigation found that there was classified information sent.
There was nothing marked classified on my emails, either sent or received.
There was classified material emailed.
I thought it would be easier to carry just one device for my work and for my personal emails instead of two.
She used multiple devices during the 4 years of her term as Secretary of State.
In looking back at our investigations into the mishandling or removal of classified information, we cannot find a case that would support bringing criminal charges on these facts.
Well, you've seen many of those clips, or at least portions of them, before, but doubters are looking at them in a whole new light now that the FBI, in a classic Friday holiday document dump, has released its report on its investigation of Hillary Clinton's email practices. It shows a degree of carelessness, her critics would say, that we have not seen before. Let's bring in our panel now. Charles Hurt, political columnist for the Washington Times. Charles Lane, opinion writer for the Washington Post, and syndicated columnist Charles Krauthammer. Charlie, any observations?
Well, now we realize why Jim Comey delivered such a scathing non-indictment when he delivered the news that they weren't going to press charges against her. But this is a real problem for Hillary Clinton. If she's going to be running a campaign as I might be the dishonest one, or I might be dishonest, I might be have been around forever, but I'm the competent one. This thing, the ineptitude that is revealed here, and the forgetfulness, which I don't really believe, and then the idea, the degree to which the people, those around her, gave her bad advice, and yet none of them have been fired. She's not throwing any of them under the bus over this. Something has to give. It is the incompetence here undermines any assertion she could ever make that she is prepared to be president.
Chuck, does anything in this report change your mind?
Well, I don't think it changes, let's put it more broadly, I don't think it's going to change anybody's mind. I think it's going to sort of reinforce pre-existing positions. And, right now the American people sort of have a negative opinion of Hillary Clinton. She's showing up in the latest USA Today poll at 59%, finding her not honest and trustworthy, which is, you'd think, a terrible number, except when you go a little further in the same poll and you see Donald Trump is at 61% honest and trustworthy. So she has been very lucky in her political opponents. And every time I see something new come out about this email issue, which just seems to sort of eat away at her all the time, I keep thinking to myself, what if the Republicans had nominated someone else for president? How would this be playing out? Because Trump's negatives are even higher than hers, and it's the only thing that's, it's one of the main things holding her up right now.
Charles?
I think what's striking about what came out today is the brazenness. I mean, everyone knows she lies. William Safire wrote 20 years ago that she was a congenital liar. So we've had 20 years of lies in the interim. But when you remember that she said originally she did it for convenience and said it with a straight face. Now it turns out that she had 13 devices. She didn't want to carry 2, but she actually had 13, many of which, I think most of which, are in fact unaccounted for. But in the end, I think what's going to hurt her, yes, it reinforces the idea of her being untrustworthy, living by a different set of rules. But that's known. I think it's baked in. I think the effect of this is that nothing can penetrate out of her campaign into the general public about who she is, what she stands for, and what she would do as president. There's no message. This is completely smothering her campaign. Can anybody remember anything she has said or done in the last week or 2 or 3 since the convention that has been news other than some new leak, some drip, or some weak campaign response to yet another piece of news?
You talked about the brazenness of it. Let's delve into a little bit of it. Full screen number 1. This shows the carelessness here and the propensity for being subject to hacking. Quote from the report: Clinton received another phishing email purportedly sent from the personal email account of a state official. The email contained a potentially malicious link. Clinton replied to the email stating, quote, "Is this really from you? I was worried about opening it." Everybody knows that if you have a phishing expedition like this, don't open it. It's unclear whether she opened the link, which is a whole different matter. Full screen number 2. A porn email. In a separate incident, Abedin sent an email to Redacted indicating Clinton was worried someone was hacking into her email, given that she received an email from a known associate containing a link to a website with pornographic material. This is the stuff that you watch out for.
This is Anthony Weiner at work again.
That's not what I meant.
He mislabeled the email address. He's done that before.
There are also questions, and I'll call up one more full screen from the report itself, about her health. I know that the campaign and many Democrats have completely dismissed this, call it completely out of bounds. But listen to this. Based on her doctor's advice, she could only work at State for a few hours a day and could not recall every briefing she received.
That was apparently during December of 2012, and that's been known. They've talked about that. I learned all about that on Twitter today myself. Nevertheless, to have it come up in the middle of the campaign again, and to have her sort of pleading bad health, right, to sort of cite that as a reason she couldn't remember this information or shouldn't be held accountable for that particular moment in the story, it's not a great moment for her because, again, it reinforces this sort of meme that's out there that she's somehow, got something wrong with her health, and it shows her, in a way, hiding behind it to protect herself in this case.
Particularly if you're claiming, with the other hand, that to raise the issue of her health is somehow illegitimate.
It's precisely the notion that the normal laws of anything simply don't ever apply to them. And then the other thing, going back to the thing about the classifications, she's been in government for a long time. She was in the U.S. Senate for a long time. These things, she couldn't have been oblivious to all of these things. She had to have known exactly what she was doing, or she really is. A friend of mine was joking at the time of Comey's announcement that she was too dumb to prosecute. Well, if she really is that stupid, then that excludes her from being president, just on those grounds.
Another point, as we close this, she also said initially at that press conference last year at the United Nations that she had 2 mobile devices. We learned in this report that she had 13 in all. And granted, it could be that some of them broke. She maybe dropped one, had a broken screen, or whatever. Maybe they weren't functioning properly. But then we learned from Catherine Herridge that an aide to Bill Clinton smashed some of them with a hammer. What completely innocent person does that kind of a thing? I don't know. Next up, the crisis in military aviation.
All of the services, the accident rates are going up. And they're going up partly because they're not getting the training they should get. They're going up because maintenance is harder and harder to accomplish. They're going up because the airplanes are getting older and older. And what really ought to bother us is the administration has really refused to take action to do something about it.
House Armed Services Committee Chairman Mac Thornberry talking about why we're seeing so many more accidents in military aviation right now. A Fox News investigation by our Pentagon producer Lucas Tomlinson says that the entire U.S. military saw a 48% increase in accidents over the last year compared to the 2 previous years. The military says that's too short of a duration to really do an effective comparison. But according to the Navy's own data, 21% of early model F-18 Hornets are capable of flying. That's 1 out of 5 are capable of flying. Super Hornets, only 50% of them are capable of flying. And right now, of the Marines' 278 F-18s, only 91 of them can fly. Let's bring back the panel now. Charles?
Well, look, this is, I think, beyond the danger it poses to our airmen, our soldiers, our Marines, and the fact that we are really not treating them well by not equipping them. There's the larger issue of this is a sign of decay and decadence for a great power. We are projecting our power around the world, or we had since the Second World War. And now we are allowing the decay of the instruments to carry it out. Look, where's the next crisis going to be? It will likely be in the Pacific Rim. We're going to need the Navy and naval aviation. It'll be probably in the Middle East, the Persian Gulf. We don't know where. But these, if we're going to act, we're going to have the means. I think what's going to happen, no matter who wins the election, there's going to have to be some renewal of our position in terms of appropriations. We cannot continue to have this sequester artificially holding back our spending on our military, which is shrinking at a time when the threats are growing. I think it has a lot to do with Obama and his withdrawal from the world. The withdrawal is going to stop under either Trump or under Clinton. We're going to have the military, and the first order of business is going to be to rebalance our military spending.
Chuck, how much responsibility lies with the president? How much with Congress?
Well, I think to the extent this goes to the sequestration issue, I think they share responsibility. That was a shared failure to come to a budget deal back in 2011 that triggered the sequestration. Now, of course, you could argue that it was the Obama administration that thought up sequestration using the defense budget as leverage politically, and I think that's the way that goes. It's clear now that what a lot of people predicted, whether the actual causation of these accidents is what the Pentagon says or what the sources of this Fox News story say is a little unclear. But obviously there was going to be trouble with the maintenance and training budgets throughout the services under sequestration. People were projecting that, Democrats and Republicans all the way through. Now we may be starting to see it. There's something else that's going on here. Charles made a good reference to rebalancing defense spending. One of the fastest growing items in the defense budget has nothing to do with military readiness at all. It's health care costs for the members of the military and their families and for retirees. And if you ever talk about reforming that, by the way, you get your head cut off politically in this town. But until we deal with that, until we deal with other aspects of the defense budget that are under this tough sequestration ceiling are starting to eat up operations and readiness, these kinds of problems will come up.
Charlie, you could make the case that the services are awaiting the arrival of the F-35, the new fighter, and that they don't want to throw money into older fighters while they're awaiting that arrival. But we also heard from a Marine general in Lucas's piece who said that he doesn't have the money to buy the new F-35s.
Yeah, and I think it is part of a much larger problem, and I would put much more of the blame at the feet of the president. For 8 years, he has undermined the military in psychological ways, in terms of trimming the mission and giving up hard-won victories in places like Iraq, and then later deciding, okay, well, actually, we do need to retake that land. And now we're seeing it in terms of the hardware. I think it'll be 10, 15 years. Optimistically, I think it'll be 10 or 15 years of a new approach before we repair the damage that's been done.
Our adversaries are fully aware of this. If not from watching congressional testimony, they have their own satellite reconnaissance that they can see these idle planes.
Well, when you look at the actions of the Chinese in the South China Sea, they are completely brazen. They have actually no fear about the United States. The U.S. is the only country that could in any way deter them. China's neighbors are too weak and would be foolish to challenge China. And they see the United States neglecting its military under a president who doesn't want to act anyway, so it sort of makes sense. But in the end, we're going to have to be reactive again. We're going to have to either assert ourselves or withdraw entirely from the world. And we're going to end up with what Walter Lippmann called insolvency, a country that will not will the means to achieve the ends. If the end is protecting our allies, keeping open the sea lanes, and preventing aggression abroad, we have to have a military that will do it. It doesn't have to be an aggressive one, but it simply has one that works, and we have one now that is really teetering on the edge. If this continues, the decay and the neglect of the infrastructure is that it won't work, and all of our enemies are going to know it.
And we've seen this repeated in history in the 1930s with the West's unpreparedness for the rise of Nazi Germany and what that led to. Hopefully that won't be the case this time around. Winners and losers when we come back. And we're back with the panel for a look at winners and losers for the week. Charlie, we'll start with you.
My winner was the USA. For the first time in 8 years, we had an American leader go into foreign soil and not apologize for America and not denigrate what America stands for. My loser is Tim Kaine. Last week, we saw him walk back his denunciation of Bill Clinton for the Monica Lewinsky scandal. And then this week, we have him out defending, the Clintons have trotted him out to defend the fact that she has not given a press conference in 270 days.
Sort of Tim Kaine's voodoo economics moment. Gosh, I wish I hadn't said that, right?
Yeah.
My winners, the incumbent establishment politicians, John McCain, Marco Rubio, incumbent Republican senators, and good old Debbie Wasserman Schultz there in the middle, who all won their primaries despite challenges from within their parties this week. My loser of the week is
won handily in all cases, right?
Yes, better than expected. My loser of the week is Donald Trump, who got off to a pretty reasonable start by standing up to president of Mexico and making a good representation of himself, and then turned it all into political sludge as soon as he got back by delivering an inflammatory speech that caused his major Hispanic advisors to leave his campaign.
I think you might get some pushback from Charles on that, because there was a more nuanced speech you were talking about last night.
Yeah, it's in my column. You'll find it in the Washington Post. It's a good newspaper.
I've read it.
My loser of the week, hands down, is the president of Mexico, which is quite an achievement considering it's the same week that the president of Brazil was impeached. But he was more of a loser because what he did was the dumbest political act for sure of the year. He ought to get the Loser of the Year award. It makes absolutely no sense for him to invite Trump, and he looked small, looked defensive, and then ended up with a pathetic little tweet afterwards defending himself. My winner of the week is Chris Wallace, who has been chosen to be one of the moderators for the presidential debate. First time it's happened to Fox. I think it's clearly a recognition of excellence. I have no idea why I'm being nice to Chris, but maybe because he actually deserves it.
And he's going to be batting cleanup, in effect, because it's the last of the presidential debates, the one that's closest to the election, I think October 18th, if I'm not mistaken.
Yeah.
And so
he'll be, I think he's already practicing.
Yeah, the chips will be on the table. Congratulations to Chris. And thanks for watching Special Report tonight. I'm Doug McKelway. Good night from Washington. On the Record, coming up next.